Hi everyone and welcome to webinar 3 of MakeCode for Microbit with our DreamSpace HomeSpace series. My name's Amanda and joining me today is Neve.
Hi everyone.
And we're joined also in the background by the rest of our team who are here to help you. So in the background for the Q&A section, which you're all probably familiar with at this point, if you have any questions throughout today's webinar, you can ask questions and we have Corey, Kaylin and Richard available to answer any questions you have in that Q&A section and help you through today's webinar. So as we said, we're on lesson 3 and we've covered quite a lot so far, and we're about to go even further today and delve even deeper into what the Microbit can do, but also what we can do with code as well. So to recap, first of all, on what we did last week, we're going to hop out of this screen and we're going to go into our browser, okay? And in our browser, remember, we can go to the Microbit website. So again, you might know this already off by heart at this stage by going to and fro, but I'll call it out again for you. It's makecode.microbit.org. So makecode.microbit.org and enter, and let's go to our browser-based Microbit website. Now, you might have some of your projects here, maybe some of your home challenges, some other stuff that we've done the other weeks that could be all lined up here for you to go back into. Today, we're going to be delving, as I said, a little bit deeper into things. So I would recommend that you actually create a new project today because we are going to be doing quite a bit of code and introducing, again, some new concepts. So it could be useful to have a clean slate to start off with. So click into new project for me. And again, we're very familiar with this interface from the last few weeks because we're in week 3 now. We have our Microbit obviously appearing on our left-hand side of our screen. We have our categories color-coded, and we have our workspace area, which is really, really useful as well. So let's recap over last week. Last week, we looked at music, and you made amazing creative tunes with Corey and Neve. They programmed the Jaws theme tune. They had a little challenge for you to see, could you figure out what the theme tune was? And most people got it at the time. It was Jaws. And for your home challenge, what we asked you to do was to recreate a song that maybe you know of or that you really like. Or you could have actually just made up your own song. So be really creative and actually start putting notes together and see, can you design and create your own song as well. So depending on what you've done, I've seen a few people comment in the Q&A telling us about songs they did, so well done. One of the entries we had in was from Sarah. So I'm going to do Sarah's tune now in a second. But first of all, on our screen, we have our on start and our forever. Now we don't need them at the moment, so I'm going to delete them. Remember, we just drag them over to our bin and let them go. And what I'm going to use instead for my music or to reprogram the start of Sarah's tune is use my buttons. So remember, buttons are how the Microbit takes in instructions, and that's in input. So go into input, and I'm going to go and grab on button A. So let's bring in that one. Now, last week, and for your home challenge, most of your time was based in this music category. So I'm going to go in here. And remember, we had lots of different options in here to choose from for our music. So this one was one that we looked at a lot last week because it was actually us deciding what piano tone or piano note that we wanted to play. So I'm going to bring in play tone middle C, which was kind of a block we used a lot last week. So play tone middle C for 1 beat. So the first thing we could do, remember, was we could change the note. So if I clicked here, my piano drop down. And remember, Corey explained last week that our keyboard is split into low keys, the middle keys, and the high keys. So that was really useful for us to understand. Now, I know that Sarah's song, the first note was middle G. So if I start on middle C, I can make my way up to middle G. There we go. Don't know if you heard that. And then middle G4, and it's automatically set to be for 1 beat. So we actually can change the speed of the beats, remember, by clicking on the arrow. So click on the arrow, and then I go down, and I actually think what they chose was 1/4 of a beat. I think Sarah's picked was for this for 1/4 of a beat. Perfect. So that's our first note in our whole sequence of notes. Remember, our sequence can be as long as we want. So what they added then was really interesting. They added a rest. So we could say play this note and then rest for a certain amount of time. And I think the rest was quite short. So an eighth. So 1/8 of a beat was their rest. Now, after these first 2 blocks of code, what Sarah did was she actually had the same 2 blocks 3 times in a row. So remember, if we have the same instructions or the same sequence a couple of times in a row, we can actually loop those instructions. And we looked at that from week 1, the idea that a loop will repeat a set of instructions for a certain amount of times. So I'm going to hop into loops and I'm going to grab my repeat block and I'm going to wrap that around my 2 notes or Sarah's notes. And I'm going to say repeat these 2 sets of instructions 3 times. So the note and the rest, loop, note, rest, loop, note, rest. Okay, perfect. After that, then Sarah's song continued on after the loop. So it's going to be underneath the loop. And it was middle C for 1 beat. So I could just leave that. That's perfect. She then had another middle C for 1 beat. So we could loop that technically, couldn't we? We could loop that one, but you know what? When it's 2, it's probably just as easy just to put the 2 blocks in. And then she had middle G. So again, I know it's C, so I can make my way.
Sorry about that, everyone. Amanda's browser just went a little bit mad there. I'm sure she'll be back with us now in 1 second.
Okay. Neve, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine now, Amanda.
Perfect. Sorry about that, guys. My speakers went mad on me. Okay, so I'm going to hop out of here and should go back in. All my notes are gone. Oh, well. Okay, so what we can do is we could actually just really quickly, I can remember this now. So I'll really quickly go in. So we had middle G, let me see, middle G for 1/4. Then we had a rest for an 8. We looped that. Well, I'm saying we, but again, this was Sarah's code. And then where I was when it all went a bit mad on me, we had middle C for 1 beat. We had another middle C for 1 beat. And then what Sarah continued on was she had middle G for a beat and another middle G for a beat. Okay, now Sarah's code continued on, right? So she had more and more. Now, if anyone wants to try that at home, it was really cool. It was the start of the Star Wars theme tune. So I thought that was really, really cool. It was brilliant. And as I said, we had people do entries from Frozen. We had people make their own songs. So well done to everyone who did their songs. It was brilliant. Now, that was last week. So we looked back on our loops. We looked at our sequence of notes and how music could be really useful and all those things. But what we want to look at today will involve a lot of code. And one of the key things we're going to be doing today is adding blocks within other blocks. And I want to show you how that could work. So what I'm going to use as an example here is how we could program our microbit to act like a dice. Okay, so let's think about this for a second. A typical dice, okay, we'd have it in our hands. And the first thing we do, we'd normally shake the dice and then we'd roll it onto the table. So if we shake our hand first, let's use that input. Remember, there's an input for the microbit called on shake. So let's grab that one in. So on shake. Perfect. Now, Neve, when we're thinking about something like a dice, what are we actually talking about really?
Okay, so when we're thinking about the dice, we're thinking that if it were using a standard dice, it has 6 different numbers because a standard dice has 6 different faces. So we're thinking of maybe numbers 1 to 6.
Okay, perfect. Great stuff. So numbers 1 to 6. So our instruction needs to be really clear, show number, and then whatever the numbers are. Okay, well, let's try that out. That's perfect. So we can go in here to basic and we can grab show number. And you can do this as well at home just to start off if you want to try this out. So show number, and you can pause obviously at any point. And like Neve said, we want 1 to 6. Now it should be random really, because when you think about it, when we roll a dice, we actually don't know what number that dice is going to land on, or we shouldn't anyway. Okay, we should definitely not know. So we needed to go randomly. Now, what's really cool about the Microbit, which maybe we haven't pointed out before, is there's a little search menu here. And if I click on that search menu, I can actually type in the word random, because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some way to randomize or make these numbers be random. And look at the top there, there's a really kind of useful looking block there. The very, very first one for me in purple says pick random 0 to 10. So I'm going to bring that one in. Now, that doesn't go underneath there. Look, even though you would think show number, but really all my Microbit's going to do when I shake it right now, if I want to test that out, when I shake, is show the number 0. Okay, I'm going to delete them because we don't need that anymore. So show the number 0, which isn't going to be really like what we want. We want a dice, don't we? So like Niamh said, we want to pick random. So let's bring this up. Now, you're going to do this a lot today, so just make sure you see exactly how we do this. We can place some blocks, if the instructions make sense, within other blocks. And normally how I explain it, or I show people how to do this, is we go from underneath where we want to add this in. So we want to say show number, and whatever the number is, we want it to be a random number between 1 and 6. So I'm going to slowly bring this in underneath, and you'll see it highlights in yellow. And when you see that, you're good to go. It means you can let that block go. It's going to hop in there. And there we go. So, Niamh, what do we need to change here so far in our code? We have show number and pick random. What's our last step here to change?
Well, it says pick random between 0 to 10. And if we're using a standard dice, we needed to pick random between 1 and 6, between the 6 numbers on our dice.
Okay, perfect. So 1, 2, 6. Okay, sounds good, Niamh. So we can now test it. So if you have board games at home, I'm sure lots of people are playing board games at the moment. I know we are, we love board games. So let's click on shake, and there we go, 1. Now I've rolled another 1. Now I've rolled a 6, a 6, a 4. So it's literally picking randomly the whole time between what we've just picked, coded there, which is brilliant, which is pick random 1 to 6, and it's showing us those numbers on our Microbit screen. Now, Niamh is going to show you a lot more code now, but that idea of putting blocks within blocks so our code makes sense will be really, really important. So Niamh, I'll hand over to you to bring everyone through what we're going to do today now, please.
Perfect. Thank you, Amanda. Okie doke. So again, I'm going to go to MakeCode.microbit.org. And when we're waiting for our homepage to load, I want everyone to give yourselves a virtual billables. Well done. And well done, Sarah, for sending us in your code. I'm looking through the Q&A section, and there's some amazing creations and recreations from last week's home challenge. So well done, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to click on new project because we're going to be doing a new project today. We're going to be doing something different. So last week we focused on music. This week we're going to focus on something a little bit more challenging, so something a little bit more difficult. Okay, so I'm just waiting for this to load. Now we won't be needing our forever block or our on start block for today's webinar, so I'm going to put them in the bin. Great. Okay, so today we're going to create a virtual game. And some of you might already know how to play the physical version of this game. So we're going to try and create the game Rock, Paper, Scissors. Only we're going to try and create a virtual version of Rock, Paper, Scissors. But we might have some people watching in today that have never played Rock, Paper, Scissors. So to get started, Amanda and I are going to demonstrate how to play the physical version, so the real version of Rock, Paper, Scissors. Are you ready, Amanda?
Ready.
Great. So I'm going to count back from 3. And when I get to 1, we're both going to choose either rock, paper, or scissors. Okie doke. 3, 2, 1. Oh,
Yes.
Amanda got that one. Okay.
Okay. Send it back to you, Niamh. Right?
Perfect.
3, 2, 1.
Let me see what you. Woohoo! Great. I got that one. Okay, so we'll have a decider round after the webinar, Amanda, but I think we'll park it there for now. Okay, so the whole purpose of us demonstrating how to play rock, paper, scissors was because we might have some people watching in today that have never played rock, paper, scissors. And I wanted to kind of just demonstrate what we need to do when we're playing rock, paper, scissors. So what did Amanda and I do when we were playing there? Well, the first thing we done, we were shaking our hand. Okay, that was the first step. And while we were shaking our hand, we were thinking about which option we were going to choose, rock, paper, or scissors. Okay, so similarly, when we're creating the virtual rock, paper, scissors game, we have to have something to mimic the hand movement, so the shake. And I know in inputs, because Amanda demonstrated there when she was doing the recap over last week's, and when she was creating the dice, that there's an on shake input, so that can mimic our movement of our hand. However, we also need to give the microbit options. So when we're thinking about rock, paper, scissors, we have 3 different options. So when we were thinking about the dice a few minutes ago, the dice had 6 different options. So rock, paper, scissors is a little bit different because it only has 3 options. But in order to give the microbit options, we need to create a variable. But what is a variable? Amanda, could you shed some light? What is a variable?
Yeah, no problem, Niamh. We can look at that right now and see what a variable is. Okay, so variables are something that we create all the time when we're coding, and people who maybe done some coding before might have come across them, and if you haven't, you might not. Some people might know the word variable, some people might not, and that's okay. But the word variable, if you think about it, what does the word vary mean? The word vary normally means something that's changing. So we're creating variables a lot of the time, and these are things that are changing. Okay, so we create them, the computer program stores them, and then we can use those variables over and over again and change them as our program goes, which is really, really useful. Let's take an example for this. So sometimes it can be, again, a little bit hard unless we have an example. So for example, if we are creating a game, what we might do is we might create a variable called score, and we might code so that score always begins at 0 at the start of the game, which makes sense because if you know, most games you play, even if it's a sport, it generally starts at 0. But then we might use that variable score throughout our game. So for example, if the game was like a basketball game, a shooting game in basketball, what you might do is you might say that when the basketball goes in the net, we get an additional score of 2 points. So we're using and changing that variable as we go, and it will remember that the score has now gone up by 2 points. And if we score again, it knows every time the basketball goes in the net, that score goes up by 2 points. So we're reusing that variable over and over again. Now, what's interesting, and maybe might be a bit tricky about today's challenge, is our variable that we create has to be able to pick between 3 things. So unlike score, which was our variable I showed you a second ago, it was set to just be one thing. It was set to be 0 at the start. Whereas with rock, paper, scissors, it's going to have to be set to pick randomly between 3 different options, which we know. So we could have rock, paper, or scissors. So it can't always be the same thing. It needs to pick randomly. So Niamh, maybe you can show everyone how we can be clever about this and get our variable to be picking randomly between 3 different options.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Amanda. Okay, so that was a really good explanation of what a variable is. So the first thing Amanda mentioned is that we need to create the variable. So I'm looking down through the categories down here, and I can see that there's a category called variable. So I'm going to click into it. And then up here it says make a variable. So that's where we're going to create our variable. And today, because we're creating the virtual rock, paper, scissors game, I'm going to call my variable RPS. And RPS is just short for rock, paper, scissors. Okay, and then I'm going to press OK. And now I've got 3 different options here in my variable section. So the next step Amanda mentioned was we need to set our variable to pick the different options. Okay, so I'm going to embed it inside my onShake block. So now, if I shake my microbit, my microbit is set, but it's not set to how many options we need. So we haven't it set properly. So when I'm thinking back to when Amanda was demonstrating how to let the dice pick randomly between 1 and 6, I remember that she used a purple block. Okay, and I think it came from the maths section because it used numbers. So I'm going to have a look for a pick random block in the maths section. Okay, and I can see it here. So pick random between 0 and 10. And I'm going to try and embed it in here where the 0 and replace that 0. So I see it's highlighted in yellow, which means that it most likely will fit, and it does. Great. Okay, so now my microbit is set that when the program is shaken, it will pick a random number between 0 and 10. So that's given it 11 different options. But when we're playing rock, paper, scissors, we only need 3 options: rock, paper, and scissors. So we need to set it to pick random between 1 and 3. So we just need to change the numbers around. Okay. So now, if I shake my microbit, it will pick a random number between 1 and 3. So it'll either pick 1, 2, or 3. But it doesn't show, it won't display anything. So our program hasn't been told yet what to display if it picks a 1, what to display if it picks a 2, or what to display if it picks a 3. And obviously they're all going to have to be different because they're going to have to represent rock for 1, paper for 2, and scissors for 3. So we need to set some conditions. Amanda, could you explain how we're going to set the conditions?
Yeah, no problem, Niamh. So our conditions, again, are a really important coding concept, very similar to the new concept we just learned a few minutes ago, variables. So we're going pretty fast here into some new territory. But like Niamh said, we kind of set the conditions for how our program should work. Now, generally, when you hear people talk about conditions in coding, they call them if, then, or else statements. So if, then, else statements. So Niamh actually used the word if a couple of times there. So you'll see that this will make sense as we go. What they do is, what our conditions allow our program to do is check to see if something is present. So for example, they're going to check the code to see is 1 present, is 2 present, or is 3 present, and what to do if those things are present. So let's think of an example again for this. What about if our thing we were monitoring was weather, for example? So our conditions might be set to say, if it's sunny today, then I will have lunch outside, or else I will have lunch inside. So I have my if statement, if it's sunny, my then is I will have lunch outside, and then the other alternative option or else is I'll have lunch inside today. So I don't know where you guys are today, but it's sunny enough here for today for me. So maybe I'll have my lunch outside today if it stays sunny for me. Now, the thing is, our conditions can be a lot longer than that. That's kind of a short one. With the one Niamh is going to do shortly with rock, paper, scissors, we have more options than just 2, don't we? It's not 1 or the other. We actually have 3 different options. So let's think about this again with our weather example. Okay, so how about if it's sunny and dry today, then I won't wear my coat outside. So it's sunny and it's dry, so I don't need to wear my coat outside today. Else if. So we're not going straight to else, we're still going with another if statement. Else if it is cloudy and dry, I will wear my coat outside. So you're still going outside, but this time you might wear your coat. Or else, the very last option might be that I will stay inside, because if it's not sunny and dry and it's not cloudy and dry, then it maybe is wet, which isn't going to be great. So I'll just stay inside. So that's when I have a couple of more options. I have if it's something, then I'll do this. If it's something else, then I'll do this. Or else I'm going to do this very, very last option that I'm left with. Okay, so Niamh will probably do this with you now so that we can do this with rock, paper, scissors. So I might hand you back, Niamh, and you can bring them through how this could be done with our game.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I'm very lucky that it's sunny and dry outside today, so I don't think I'll be needing my coat. Great. Okay, so now we need to set our conditions. So the first thing Amanda mentioned was the if, then, else block. Okay, and that can be found in the logic section. So if, then, else. So I'm going to drag it out, and that needs to go underneath where we set our variable to pick between our options. So I want it to connect in underneath, so I have to make sure that it highlights in the correct place, and now I'm going to let go of it. Okay, so now I've added my if, then, else block. I need to fill in some information into it because it still doesn't make complete sense in terms of our game, because it says if true then. Okay, so we need to change this around a little bit. We need to find something that's going to go in here, and it's going to explain that if our game is equal to 1, then show us option 1. When we're thinking about rock, paper, scissors, we always say rock, paper, scissors. So option 1 would be rock. I've never heard of anyone calling it scissors, paper, rock before. So I'm going to keep my option 1 as my rock because that's the first word in the name of the game. Okay, so I want this section to represent option 1, which is our rock. Okay, so I'm looking for a block, an equals block. So I'm going to go back into logic. And I see over here there's a 0 is equal to 0 block in the comparison section. Okay, so I'm going to drag it out. It's a diamond shape, so it looks similar in shape. So it might embed up here where the true is. It's after highlighting, so that looks optimistic. Great, excellent. So now if 0 is equal to 0. Okay, so that doesn't really make sense in terms of our game. So I'm trying to think logically about our game. The first thing we done was we set our variable, and our variable is another word for our game, basically. So I'm going to have a look in our variable section. Okay, so here's our set variable and our change variable, but here's a shortened version of our variable name, or PS, which stands for rock, paper, scissors. Okay, so I'm going to see if this will slot in here where my first 0 is, and it's after highlighting. Great, excellent. So now my code says if rock, paper, scissors is equal to 0. But looking up here at my PickRandom block, we've no 0 option. Our first option is 1. So if rock, paper, scissors, or if our game is equal to 1, then, and then in here we want to put something that's going to represent our first option. Okay, so as I already mentioned, our first option is rock. So I want to represent a rock. So I can use a string and I can type in rock to the string, and that can represent my rock. I can also maybe try and draw a rock using the show LEDs block, or I could look in the show icons block and see if there's anything that represents something similar to a rock. However, I think I'm going to get creative and I'm going to try and draw a rock. So I'm going to pull out the show LEDs block, and I want it to go in here underneath if my game is equal to 1. So now I'm going to have to try and create what I feel looks like a rock. I'm going to try and create a kind of a square rock today. So this is going to be what symbolizes my rock in my virtual version of the rock, paper, scissors game. Okay, so now if I shake my Microbit, and if the game chooses a 1 at random, it's going to show this picture, which symbolizes our rock. Okay, so at this point, I would advise maybe pausing the webinar, making sure that you've created your variable and that all your blocks look similar to my blocks. But obviously, get creative. You can create whatever type of rock you want, or you can embed a string instead of a show LED. So it's up to you. Make it personal to you. Excellent. So moving on to the second option. So now I need to create my conditions for our second option. But before I do that, I've no diamond shaped block here. So at the minute, I've just if and else. So I've only two options. So I need to expand it using the plus symbol down here. So I'm going to click on it and it's going to give me a third section. And then my diamond shape reappears or appears. Okay, so now I have if, and else. So we've three different options. And in our game, we need three options. We need rock, paper, and scissors. Okay, so my option 2 is going to be paper because we've already done rock. So now we're on to our paper. So again, I'm going to go back into logic section and I'm going to look for the 0 is equal to 0 block or the equals block embedded in here. And I'm going to go back to my variables. So if my variable, rock, paper, scissors, so if my game is equal to 2, so if it picks a 2 at random, then it needs to show us paper or something that symbolizes paper. And again, I'm going to try and be creative and I'm going to try and recreate what a sheet of paper looks like using the show LEDs block. So I'm going to make sure that it goes in underneath the second option because this is our second option. I'm going to just click on the blocks. And I'm going to try and click them all so that they're all going to light up so it looks like an A4 sheet of paper. Bit of a slow process, but that's okay. We've all the time in the world. So I'm going to zoom out so that you can see my whole entire code and I'm going to pull it up a little bit. Okay, and I might zoom out one more little bit. Okie doke. So now I would advise again pausing, making sure you've all the conditions necessary for if we'd say our program picks a 1 at random and all the conditions necessary for if our program picks a 2 at random. Okay, so at this point, I would advise you to maybe pause and get all caught up before we move to our last section. So I'm having a look here. So if I shake the microbit, our microbit or our game is set to pick randomly between 1 and 3. If the game picks a 1, show us these LEDs. Else, if the game is equal to 2, show us these LEDs which represent paper. Or else, so what's our third option? We've got rock, we've got paper, and our third option is scissors. Okay, so if our program picks a 3 at random, it needs to show us scissors. Okay, so I'm quite happy with my artistic ability. However, I know that there's a shortcut because I know there's a pair of scissors in the show icon block. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. However, if you'd like to create your own scissors, fire on ahead. Okay, so I'm going to have a look in my show icons. I'm going to go down to the bottom. And here is a pair of scissors. So I'm going to click on that block. And that's going to be my third option. Okay, so I've now got my if my game is equal to 1, else if my game is equal to 2, and else show the icon. So I don't have if my game is equal to 3 here. Some of you might have noticed that, okay? And there's a reason for that. So the reason for that is if it doesn't pick a 1 or if it doesn't pick a 2, the only other option it has is to pick a 3, okay? Because we've set it to only pick between 1 and 3. So we don't need to have a diamond-shaped block or an equals block here because the only other option if it doesn't pick a 1 or a 2 is to pick 3, okay? So I just wanted to point that out because some people might be wondering why we don't have an equals block here, explaining that else if our game is equal to 3, show our scissors. Okay, so that's almost all the hard work done. Now I'm going to test out my game and see how it works. Okay, so I'm going to go against my virtual rock, paper, scissors game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over the shake. Okay, so you can see our Microbit is doing the virtual shake. I'm not going to click it just yet. I'm just going to hover over it. Then I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to count down from 3. And then I'm going to pick which option I want to pick. And the Microbit's going to pick its option at random. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Oh, I didn't click it that time, sorry. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the rock obviously beats my scissors. So I'm going to have to go again. So I want to get the better of my, yeah, we'll go the best of 3. I want to get the better of my virtual Microbit. Okay, let me try it again. So 3, 2, 1. Oh, they're after getting me again. So their scissors is going to cut my paper. And I go once more for good luck. Hopefully I'll get the last one, even though I'm sure the virtual Microbit has got me this time. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Oh, they got me again. Okay, so they threw a scissors again. So that can happen. It can pick the same thing twice or maybe even 3 times in a row because it's picking it at random. So why don't you pause your webinar and finish off the rock, paper, scissors game? And why don't you go best out of 3 with your virtual rock, paper, scissors game and see if you can beat your virtual Microbit? Okay, so thank you so much for listening in today. You got so much covered. You got really, really far with the coding concepts. We've got so much covered over the last 3 weeks. I'm so proud of you all. And I'm going to pass you over to Amanda because Amanda's going to explain. This week we've got a choice in our home challenges. So we've got 2 home challenges and you can pick which one you would prefer to do. So it's really exciting this week.
Great, Niamh. Thanks so much. So well done, everyone. As Niamh said, that was an awful lot of stuff to learn today and a lot of new coding concepts. But these concepts are going to really help you develop lots more projects with your Microbit. And even if you do other types of coding, whether it's not with Microbit, it's with other platforms, these terms that we looked at today are going to be useful for all of those types of projects that you might do. So let's just recap over what those terms were again. So the first one was variables. So remember, variables were things that we create in our computer program and they store information. But remember, the word variable, vary, so we can change them as well. So we create them, they store information, but they're also things that we can change in our program as we go if we want. Okay, so well done on that. We created a variable in the game there. Niamh created one called RPS, and she was able then to use that variable in different ways to get the game to work properly. The second term that we introduced today were conditions. So we talked about them being if, then, else statements. So allowing our computer program to analyze the code and understand that if a certain situation was present, then it would do something. So in our case there, remember, our game was picking randomly between 1 and 3, and we told it what to do using our if-then statements. If it picked number 1, then show us the icon of a rock. Or else, if you pick 2, then show us a paper. Or else, it's going to be a scissors. As Niamh said, there's no other option left at the end, so you're left with your else by that stage. So really good work on that one as well. Now, there's one other word I want to touch on here, and we didn't discuss it during our webinar, but I am going to mention it now in the next slide when we talk about our home challenges. And that word is accessibility. So accessibility, quite a long word. Now, what accessibility is ensuring that something can be used by a person who has a disability. And that's really important. So we want to make sure that any projects we do or any technology we make is accessible so that it can be used by people maybe who have different types of disability. And that's going to be part of Home Challenge 1. So let's have a look at our home challenges. Right, now, as Niamh said, there are 2. So you have an option. You can choose one or the other, or if you want, if you have loads of time, you can do both, okay? So the first challenge is for us to design an accessible dice. So if we think about the typical dice that we talked about at the start of our coding project earlier when we said show number and pick a random number between 1 and 6. Now we want you to get the microbit to act like a dice, but it has to be accessible. And not just act like a dice the way it did earlier, showing us a number. We want to actually see it like it would be the actual cube dice, you know, with the way it has dots. So it might be 1 dot, you roll that, it's 1. It has 2 dots for 2, 3, and so on. Okay, we want it to actually look like that. So have a think about that. How could we see actual dots instead of numbers? Well, we could use our LEDs, couldn't we? So can we use what we've just learned about there? Can we use our conditions and our variables to set the microbit to pick randomly between 1 to 6, like we did earlier? But if it picks 1, then maybe we see the LED light for 1 come on. But what if someone can't see very well? What if they have a sight disability and they can't see that? Can we make this more accessible? Well, within your if-then block, you don't just have to have one instruction. You can show an LED, and maybe if someone can't see very well, maybe they can hear very well. So maybe we can do a musical note as well. How about that? So we can be really accessible with our code by given options. Maybe someone won't hear, but they can see. So we're given options there for people and making them as accessible as we can, which is really, really important. So that's your first one. So design an accessible dice. Now your other one is kind of similar to a task or the home challenge that we gave you in week 1, where we asked you to do animations for different exercises. Well, this time we want those exercises to be picking randomly. So when you did that in week 1, you knew when you hit A certain exercise would come on, and when you hit B, maybe a certain exercise will come on. Well, how about this time the microbit picks at random between, it's up to you, but maybe I'd say 5 exercises. So it's going to pick random 1 to 5. And if it picks 1, then I see a certain result. So up in the top right corner there, I have done out some code to start you off on that one. So I've said if exercise equals 1, then show string jog. So if it picks 1, it's going to show jog across the microbit. It's going to start playing some music that we can jog to, and maybe we see an animation as well. But remember, we have to set our variable before we do that code as well. Now we're going to, on the link we share at the end of the webinar, we're going to share some hints and starter tasks to help you with this, because this is pretty advanced stuff and you might need some help just getting going with the start of the blocks on these tasks. So that's no problem, we can share that with you. But we're dying to see what you can do with all your code based on what you've learned today. Now, before we finish up, Niamh, we might have a look at some questions that we have gotten in there during the webinar. So the first one, Niamh, is how many options can we have with our if-then else? Are we limited to 3 or 6, or how many can we do?
We're very lucky in that we actually aren't limited, so it's unlimited, so we can have as many options as we want. So depending on what kind of variable we're creating and how many options the variable has, we can create as many as we want.
Okay, perfect. And then when we kind of touched on it there with the home challenge, but Niamh, I might get you to recap. After we say if something equals then, within the then area, are we limited? Like, can we only do an LED, or can we only do a music, or what can we do then?
That's an excellent question as well. No, we can have as many LEDs or strings embedded in each section after the then as we want. So if I wanted my rock to show a string saying rock, and then show my LEDs of the version of a rock I created, I could do that. Or if I wanted to add in maybe a show icon, I could have 3 different things. I could have as many as I wanted. And the same with paper and the same with scissors. So you can have as many as you want in each section.
Okay, and then there's a really good question here as well about how we can upload our code to show you what we have done. So actually stay tuned. So we're hoping to have a way for you to do that with us by next week, where you can actually show us your code. Or if you have someone at home, a parent maybe, who's able to share that with us, our information from Twitter is there at the bottom of the page. So your parent can maybe share that with us if you want either. That could be a way to share right now. But we're hoping to have a really good way for you to share your content, because we know people are doing amazing projects at home with these home challenges. We're seeing some of them, but we're not seeing all of them, and we really want to see that. Okay.
Exactly. And it'd be great to even see next week's ones, because the accessible dice you could use to play a board game. So that would be really interesting. And obviously, because it's accessible, everyone in the family would be able to join in. So that would be really cool. And then the exercise picker you could use every day to choose whatever exercises you program it to pick at random, and you could do a 5-minute workout. So that would be really cool as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you everyone. We will be picking up next week again, and we will be doing so on Monday. So obviously yesterday was Bank Holiday Monday, so that's why today's webinar occurred today and Tuesday instead of Monday. So next week we'll be back as usual at our live time on Monday, and you can join us at the usual spots. And remember, we will be putting some hints up on our this web link, our HomeSpace files web link, which is our wakelet. You will find lots of useful videos to recap if you want to watch back over today's lesson, if you need some help for your home challenge, maybe looking back today, or if you want to see some of the useful resources that we have up there, that's the link there that you can go to. But until then, we'll chat next week. So thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Slán go fóil agus tásúla gom go méid seachtain deas a goibh.